Okay, let's see, are we recording? I'm not used to the new camera. Some ball moves. I don't have a picture of the box or anything like that. I got one on the game box, but I don't have a picture for you to see. And so obviously I'm biased in terms of, oops, let's close the door. In terms of the subject matter, this is something that I'm very, very much into and really kind of wanted to see. I think the game fails to be a simulation of the election, at least if you play the 5-player game. The 3-player game might actually succeed in being one, but a simulation of the election probably wouldn't be a whole hell of a lot of fun, because Wilson's kind of preordained to win. The exciting part about it is that it's a multiplayer, real general election. And the game has some neat aspects, game-wise, that make it an enjoyable election game in a way that's set in the historical period and not completely ahistorical, which is to say, if you look at what happened, it was pretty hard for the prohibitionists to get any traction in the game. The socialists did pretty well in my game. They came in second, actually, which may be a sign of something a little wanky in it, but once you make that decision that it's not going to be, a simulation in the sense that you don't expect Wilson to kind of run away with it if everybody's competing as hard as they can, then you're looking at, well, how is it as a game? And it's not necessarily balanced, although maybe with further plays you can come up with ways to do well with someone like the prohibitionists, who seem to have weaker cards overall. On the other hand, it's a multiplayer game, so there's some opportunity and quite a bit of take that in it that would allow you to make some actions, to look at who's ahead and try to hit them. The problem with that is that it's almost always better, at least in my view, to pad your own score with the cards than to go negative on other people. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is the negative cards generally don't do more damage than you can run up your own score with, at least somewhere. But the other is, anytime you play a negative card against someone, you create a map here. You create a bonus for them in the popularity box, which gives them a very flexible opportunity to score a point anywhere at the end of the game. Popularity is pretty rare and pretty hard to get a hold of. Each player has one card that can generate popularity for themselves, and otherwise you're really relying on other players to give it to you in more ways than one. Staying isn't gonna unroll. No. Anyway, it ends up playing out as kind of an exciting finish to the whole thing, which I like. On the other hand, that exciting finish is, as I noted in the wrap itself, a little of a failure as a simulation, which is to say that whatever kind of polling you're doing in the state, if you have a 5% lead in the polls, that's pretty damn dominating. And in this game, you don't have that kind of domination unless someone has at least twice as many cubes as you do. Whatever cubes mean, because cubes may not be directly aligned with votes. But this is one of the few games that I've seen where you can very clearly see in front of everyone, yeah, I'm not going to be competing in that state. I'm already losing. So unless I throw myself in heavily, I'm guaranteed a loss. most games that I'm used to for election games have kind of a secret hidden vote aspect to run the whole, to run that kind of tension at the end of the game. And this one instead relies on the luck of drawing the cubes. And I like both. There's no question there. I can see ways of using this cube generation to create an uncertainty, yet still maintain a simulation level to it that is kind of appealing to me. And I'm kind of thinking, wow, I might tinker around for myself. But in terms of what it's going to generate, in terms of the strategy that you're playing towards the game, you're still trying to get your cubes into place, but it's not deterministic in the way that, say, Road to the White House would be. So in Road to the White House, you can spend money on polling and constantly be finding out how you're doing in the states you're interested in. So it's not like the hidden votes are all that hidden to somebody who has the money to consider whether or not they want to, how much they want to take polling into account. And once the polling is available to you, well, you know exactly what everybody else has. They don't know what you have, but you know exactly what they have. So you can target your points for that. Now, it goes stale, they can spend money, and they can do things inside of it. But in this game, it's sitting right in front of you as open information. How many cubes are there? But the number of cubes that are there is a total crapshoot. If you have 5 cubes and your opponent has 3, or better, 6 to 4 is better because it's easier for me to do the calculation, right? Well, if you're looking at a 60-40 polling situation, if that's what it's meant to represent, that seems way out of line. But again, as I said, it may not really represent that. It represents what it represents, however many cubes you have in there is your chance of winning. So you're not gonna, there's a certain base line of voters in each state that's gonna go for one party or the other, and sometimes that's actually unable to be broken by almost anyone. Things like the McGovern race, where Massachusetts voted for him, that showed how anti-Republican Massachusetts was at that point. And a number of other situations that you can look back through in history. You can say, well, here's this tremendously popular person, but he still doesn't sweep everything, and the states he doesn't sweep are the ones that consistently vote for the other party. So there's just sort of a base in certain states you essentially can't compete. And that's no fun in an election game. So very few of them take that kind of pattern into consideration. Campaign Manager has the swing states idea, which kind of works, because it just says, well, you don't really care about, the majority of states. You know which way they're going to go. You focus on the ones that can bring your total of votes over the top. And in this, it's a more traditional style election game where you're in play everywhere, and you can win the big landslide conceivably, although in 5 players that's probably not going to happen. But anyway, I think the neatest mechanisms in this are that kind of cube counting at the end of the game, where they all go in the cup, you rattle it around, and you draw one out. That's kind of exciting. And the card play, this draw 8 cards, figure out what you want to do this turn and what you probably want to do next turn, although you'll be getting new cards. Put 4 of the cards back on top of the deck. They'll be coming back into your 8-card hand for next turn that you get to winnow down to 4 cards. And so you have a larger pool of cards to decide what you want to do this turn. A little bit more flexibility than you would if you just drew a random hand. but you also have this, I know what I'm getting in the future, in the near future, and I've got to kind of plan for that, and I can kind of play ahead. In my case, I allowed myself to peek at those 4 cards. Some people might not want to do that. For me, it's kind of a look. If it was my information, if I can't peek, can I write it down? You know, what can I do to do that, and how much will that spoil the game? So that's just kind of me. I don't mind memory games. It's just they're less effective when I'm playing 5 different players at the same time over the course of a couple of days to play the game out. So yeah, you know, this is mainly because of the topic and because it handles it in a reasonably representative way, even if it's not, you know, really simulating the situation. I'm not going to get results that that correspond with reality. I take a certain amount of enjoyment in this kind of game. It's probably not one that I'm going to play solo too much because I can see pretty clearly that it isn't going to it isn't going to really represent the election in the details that I'd like to see it happen. And I'm not sure that if it did, it would be a good game. I think as it is, it's a good game as opposed to a simulation of the 1912 election. So that's kind of cool. It definitely faces you with some tough choices when you're looking at that handful of cards trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do? And then in the face of the enemy, of course, your plans fail, because there's small things that your opponents can do that have an effect on you that they aren't really trying to hurt you necessarily, but they step into the state you were counting on moving through. And now that state's going to cost you an extra cube to move through. And the relationship of the value of the cards. Some cards are targeted at a specific state, and you essentially get an extra cube if you throw all your votes in that state or whatever. But that extra cube goes away if you have to spend it to move to get to the state, if you have to spend an extra cube on an earlier turn. You have some cards that allow you a lot of flexibility, though. So on, I'd say maybe half your turns or whatever, your movement's not really going to be based too much on spending cubes for movement. Although the express trains, which are kind of not really spending cubes for movement, but where you can jump around from rail location to rail location, give you, well, they usually are I think they're all 1-point cards, so they give you kind of a 1-point card for a move, but it's usually a more significant move. But there are a number of cards in the game that give you hey, throughout this round, you have special movement that doesn't cost you anything. And those are really, really appealing for targeting, hitting certain locations, etc. But that means you leave holes in your national, you know, strategy for generating electoral votes. And those holes are interesting because they tend to happen in pretty much the same spaces where the big transport hubs aren't, and where there aren't big states that are valuable. So you end up with these states that nobody's got votes in, and there's a few ways to get them. There's cards that allow you to give votes in states you don't visit. But then there's also this kind of neat dynamic of the endorsements down here. I rolled it all up, where you get to throw your cubes into. And this is like another competition for a state. If you throw a lot of cubes into there, you're weaker on the board as a whole. And this is why the socialists did so well in my game, is that they won both of these. And they basically destroyed, I should have mentioned this in the wrap-up, but I didn't think of it then, but they basically destroyed the progressives and knocked them down into 4th place, because those were the two people who were competing for the endorsements. If you win the endorsement, you get all your cubes that you put in there. But if you don't win the endorsement, you get nothing. So the more you start committing into winning an endorsement, the more important it becomes to do so. And that was kind of the why I thought the socialists or the progressives. But when I first drew that, when I thought the socialists would win, but those endorsements don't work everywhere. Popularity works everywhere. But the endorsements only work in states where nobody's gone, i.e. those halls that I was talking about. And in the 5-player game that I played, not a lot of states were empty. Or, in the case of the senatorial endorsements, they go in swing states, which is a pretty limited number as well. So Debs was unable to really focus on the states he wanted to. I thought, oh, all these bonus cubes, that's going to be great. Yeah, it's not so great if you don't have, if you have a very limited locations you can put them in. So you don't want to go as heavy as I did in my game, for either side, really, because there just weren't that many places to compete in that were worthwhile out of the empty states, which are almost, by definition, not going to be worth a whole hell of a lot, because if they were worth something, somebody would have gone to them. Or the swing states, most of which aren't worth very much. There are a couple that have some good points in them, though. It's not like today, where swing states like Florida and Ohio are a big piece of the puzzle. The sort of edge that a given party has, and this is true in almost every game that I've played on elections, with the exception of Campaign Manager, which finesses the issue by saying those states are just out of play. They're going to be in one person's, one person's going to have them in their column no matter what. That just didn't feel strong enough to me. Each of the players also has their own special advantage, and those were kind of difficult to deal with. I can't really talk too much about components, but the only place that I had access to them was on the rules. Now, luckily, they're on the front page of the rules, so they were easy to find and see at all times. The rules themselves seem complete. I don't remember any questions I had after I worked my way through them, but they're not presented in the most easy to kind of absorb fashion. So, I mean, it goes with this nice little intro, but then it goes into, here are your character advantages, candidate advantages. And here's what the game looks like. Okay, that's fine. Setup. Okay, might as well be in the front. But then it comes to the kind of this position where there's information that you have to have at different times. So, for example, the character advantages, having them on the front was awesome, but I'd rather have them on a plate and have them deeper in the rolls, because they kind of don't hit you right away. How you handle the card management in the game, which is definitely innovative, it makes sense where that shows up in the rolls. Right after the sequence of play, this is how you play your cards, etc. The movement, the values on the cards, all that's handled fine. But then when we get to the election preparation, things start to get fuzzy again. In terms of, I think I would have put the concept of the absolute plurality ahead of things that were determined by the absolute plurality. And in fact, not just the absolute plurality, but also how you generally determine who won something. And that's generally determined, it's a neat mechanism. It's kind of weird because you're reading through the rules and saying, okay, so what is this about the absolute plurality going on here? Okay, that's later on in the rules. Weird. Okay. It seems like the ordering's not the most efficient for absorption. But that absolute plurality is the, hey, if I've got twice as many cubes as you do, you're out of the box. Not at any point, just at the end of the game. And then the people who are in the run cup, and you pick one, and that person just, winner take all in every case, basically. The only thing that doesn't work, oh shit, I screwed up. The only thing that doesn't work that way is popularity. It worked out about equal, but you get the net difference of popularity. So we probably would have only seen a couple of cubes going to the popularity side of things. Oh well. I always screw up when I start playing a new game, and all those cubes in there, I wanted to use them. The popularity cubes, basically, each person who's got the highest number gets the difference between the amount they have and the next person down. And I just gave everybody all their cubes. Given what you tend to do with them, I don't think it had too much effect on things. Although the fact that the Republicans had to go first may have hurt them. The more cubes that there are, for example. Anyway, I think it's a neat game. I probably would pick it up because of my interest in dedicated to the particular election style of I don't know, the topic being dedicated to one particular election with specific candidates, specific instances related around them. And that works well for me. I liked Divided Republic. I think I like this about the same. Like Divided Republic, though, I don't feel like it really captures as a really strong simulation of what that election was like. And that's probably my big negative to it. As a game, I think it's I think it is going to be a lot of fun. Certainly need more playings to be able to tell, hey look, do the Dryades actually have a chance in this? Because one of the problems that I mentioned in the wrap was the cards that you can use to hit other people, and I think I may have mentioned it here too, who knows. The cards that you can use to hit other people with, you have to make you're making a decision that person is your main competitor, because at most you're getting like one extra cube for hitting them rather than what you could play the card for in normal movement and just the points that you get there. Of course, points that you get there don't necessarily translate into useful votes. First of all, they all end up in one state or in the endorsement box, or split between the two. And some people get shut out of the endorsement boxes so early that they're just like, well, screw this, man. It's not worth it for me to put that big investment in for a chance at getting the endorsement. So the you're making a point to hit one or more people, but each person you hit takes up some of the firepower that you have available, and each person you hit gets a cube in the popularity box, which probably translates to them getting an additional cube at the end of the game in an important place. It doesn't guarantee that, though, and in fact, if you're not in the lead for popularity and they're not in the lead for popularity, it may not hurt you at all to hurt them. In which case, that probably becomes an advantageous thing if they are your main competition. If they're not your main competition, if your competition is split between a couple of people, you're better off just tucking the points into your own pocket. And that's kind of the problem with those cards which allow you to hit another player is that because it's a multiplayer game, you're targeting one player and you do a little bit more damage to them, but unless you're fairly certain that they are your competition for the win, you're probably better off just stowing some points away for yourself. And that means for at least the first half of the game, you're in that position because you can't tell who's going to win. You know, I could go into New York, drop a big 5 cube in there, think, well, I'm scaring everybody off. Well, everybody's got a card that lets them go into New York and drop a big 5 cube in there. And that means that I'm not really scaring anyone off because once they draw theirs, they can go in there and then they can hit my big cube that I put earlier and, you know, drive my points down so that I no longer look dangerous there. And that's the kind of thing that we saw. And I think that's actually one of the ththings that hurt the prohibitionists is they put their big points in New York early and then they were chased out of there by someone who put their big points in. But everybody had a I've got big points in New York card, and I've got this card, and I've got that card. I didn't feel like there was, you know, as much differentiation between the parties in terms of geographical power. The Democrats' advantage is huge, though, in the South. They can basically wander around the South and pretty much guarantee it, and that becomes kind of a threat on everyone else in terms of, well, maybe I ought to stay out of the South. Well, if they stay out of the South, the Dems just pick it off because all those empty states have a little donkey on them. All right. Let's set this up.